welcome back to Whovian Espresso, and today we are going to be discussing the next instalment in Doctor Who Flux, Village of the Angels, which just aired a few minutes ago. I've just finished watching it, and there's a lot to discuss, a lot of spoilers, so I just want to give you a bit of a preemptive warning before we get into the discussion about the episode, that this video will contain spoilers, but let us get on with the video and talk about this instalment. So, right off the back, I want to talk about the Weeping Angels and their involvement in this story. And they made for quite an interesting new take on the Weeping Angels, actually. In the sense that, I think, if I were to, quickly run down my thoughts on this, I'd say it's the best interpretation of the Weeping Angels in the show, personally. I'm not a big fan of Blink, is all I'll say. I think particularly Blink hasn't aged as well, and I know a lot of people complained about adding to the Weeping Angel lore and saying, it made them less scary, but actually I think it made them more scary, finding out what new talents they had. And in this episode we get a whole load of great moments for the Weeping Angels, including one moment that made me so chuffed, because about a year ago I wrote a short story based on the lead-in to Blink, where Martha and the Doctor arrive at Western Drumlands, and they arrive at a Weeping Angel-infested house, and there's a piece of paper with a drawing of a Weeping Angel on it in my short story, and the Weeping Angel comes out of it, and I was so chuffed. I don't think they actually read or listened to my short story, because obviously they would have written it before I wrote it anyway, but I just thought it was so funny at that coincidence. But anyway, it was really effective how they did the stuff with the drawings, and also the way that the Weeping Angel was drawn onto the seismograph, is it? I think it's seismograph, something like that. The machine that Professor Jericho had, that was amazing. And also there's a lot of great new techniques in this one as well. There's the second time you get killed by a Weeping Angel, you literally crumble into granite, which is so sinister. I literally jumped. I very rarely find Doctor Who scary. And to be fair, I didn't exactly find this episode scary, I just acknowledged that it would have been very scary for someone who would have been half my age, for instance. So yeah, it was probably one of the scariest Doctor Who's, I think, probably ever, in my opinion. I mean, you are talking to the person who had nightmares about the Absorbaloff, so, I mean, there's a certain level of what I will find scary, but I do genuinely think that their involvement in Flux and the way they've been handled has been just incredible, and I think that it was definitely the right decision to bring Maxine Alderton on for this story. I think she really added to the sense of atmosphere in this episode, and also, I can't remember their name, the director of this story did a phenomenal job. I think genuinely it's one of the best directed Doctor Who stories. I remember when it started, and I got this really dark, foreboding horror movie vibe, which Doctor Who was trying to emulate before, but I think particularly here it worked really well, particularly with the inclusion of the angels. But there were some really great shots in this. Particularly the opening sequence, you got these shots of his mouth and his eyes, Professor Jericho. But the shot that took the biscuit for me was when, what's her name? Claire looks into the mirror. She's got no angel wings. She then washes her face, and then she's got angel wings behind her. That made me go crazy. I was like, oh my god. It was just so amazing, all the different shots they were able to do with the Weeping Angels. And it does show how much more the show can achieve with the Weeping Angels now they've got a slightly bigger budget. And I know this series has been made in lockdown, essentially. So I think a lot of people have said, some of the CGI doesn't look as good. But honestly, I think it's some of the best CGI the show's ever had. And I think the fact that they haven't been able to do more abroad filming has really helped them go into the CGI in this episode. Because particularly when you've got the shots of the universe as well, that's amazing too. It's just all the stuff they were able to do with it. It's just incredible. And the shot where they're coming out the TV screen and everything. I never really felt a strong connection to the Weeping Angels, but after this episode, I really do kind of get that. So, yeah, I think there's enough of me rambling about the Weeping Angels in this story. Obviously, there's the cliffhanger and the twist that they're working for the Division as well, which I thought was really quite creepy, actually. This idea that they use all species, which kind of we got an idea of when obviously, because they introduced that Carvanista was a division operative. So it's interesting they've got operatives from every species, and this idea that the division is sort of everywhere is quite sinister as well, which I quite like. So yeah, I thought the inclusion of the Weeping Angels was really good. I thought the scene on the beach with Claire and the Doctor, where she's sort of doing this sort of contact scene, I love the contact scene, it was really nicely shot. I love the idea of the beach, which kind of gave me, I don't know what it's reminding me of, but it sort of gave me this sort of dream landscape, reminding me of the Timeless Child. I wonder if there's some significance to this beach, maybe, that we'll find out later on. But also the idea of a rogue Weeping Angel. Why were they going rogue? Which makes me wonder, just like, what have they done to get the division to turn on them? So I'm curious if that will get developed or if it will just get far on about. But yeah, rambled on about the Weeping Angels for 5 minutes now. Let's talk about some of the other characters in the story. Right, let's have a talk about Claire. Claire was an interesting one in this episode. As I mentioned, she was really great in that scene on the beach with the Doctor. I thought there was something quite mysterious about her that hasn't yet been fully developed. I wonder if we will see her again. I'm also curious to see if we'll see Professor Jericho again, because he's on the credits for another episode as well. But this episode, she gave me, who was it? In Hyde, the woman in Hyde, I can't remember her name now. There's kind of two ways to describe this episode, like two different worlds. There's the Hyde atmosphere of all these sort of machinery, and I think that's in the 60s too. I can't remember her name. But yeah, so Hyde sort of atmosphere is inside Professor Jericho's sort of study type thing, I guess. And then there's the outside world, which gives me the Damon's vibe from obviously the 70s, 71, I think 1971. And obviously to be replicating the Damons is quite a big feat, to be honest, because the Damons is highly regarded as one of the greatest sort of horror-like episodes of Doctor Who, and it's sort of got that vibe to it, particularly in the earlier scenes with the scenes in the dark with all the rain pouring down. And there's another character in this episode, when I get to her, she reminds me of someone from the Damons as well. So it was very nice to see this whole sort of vibe with this episode, and to have Claire at the centre of that as this big sort of enigma. I just thought she was quite interesting. But yeah, I mean, there could have been more done with her, I think, maybe, but I think what they did with her is perfectly fine. I'm sure we'll get to see her again. I think the idea of having the Weeping Angel sort of hiding in her was quite a clever one as well. I just thought the Weeping Angels were phenomenal in this episode. It really showed what they could do. And I'm probably going to keep talking about them, even though I've talked about them for 5 minutes. But yeah, Claire was great. I hope we get to see her. Professor Jericho was quite nice. It's nice to have another classic actor return. Obviously, we had Philip Glenister last year. This guy is from The Twin Dilemma. I'm not sure who he played. I'd say one of the twins. I could be wrong, but I have only seen The Twin Dilemma once, so I saw it on Twitch a long time ago, but he's very good here. I think this story does him a lot more justice than The Twin Dilemma ever did him, I'm sure. But, Twin Dilemma isn't that bad, but still, he's very good in this episode. I liked his sort of the bit where the Weeping Angel uses his voice and sort of takes advantage of his insecurities, like he's trying to tap into his psyche. I thought it was really clever and a very interesting use of the Weeping Angels. I'm wondering if a lot of these skills did develop because, like, maybe the division have experimented on them and sort of brought out different techniques in them, or maybe it's because they've been like trained or something. That would be interesting. But the idea that this Weeping Angel can sort of interrogate this person is kind of very creepy, actually, because particularly we had Angel Bob taking advantage of the Doctor and saying, "Oh, I died in fear and alone," sort of very much trying to provoke the Doctor. And here we have a very similar case as well, but also the very sort of tone deaf voice, very toneless, I don't know how to describe it, voice of the Angel was quite sinister as well. So he's great at doing both voices. There's a clear distinction between the two voices, despite them being the same actor, I think. So it was quite interesting to see that. Also, I loved the line where it's like, "I am not blinking." I just love that line so much. It's funny. And then, of course, he gets transported back in time to 1901. So I'm presuming he's going to stay with Yaz and Dan into the next episode. So I'll be interested to see how that continues and how they sort of develop that. If he plays a larger role in the rest of the series. He was very good. I quite enjoyed his character. I think he has an interesting relationship with the Doctor. I also think it's quite interesting how he's sort of trying to get all this information about psychic experiments. I think there's an interesting background to that, which I hope gets developed a bit more. But overall, he was great. I loved him. Next up, let's talk about Mrs. Haywood, or as I believe she's also known as, is it like Barbara? I don't know what her name is, but she's Peggy, that's it. Obviously, it's revealed that Mrs. Haywood is Peggy at the end of it, because Peggy is the child that goes missing and is transported back in time to 1901 to live out her days. So obviously, Mrs. Haywood probably knows what happens in the next episode. So I do wonder. She sort of disappeared, so I presume the Weeping Angels maybe got her again and killed her. So obviously she could not tell Dan and Yaz what to do, I guess, because she was not there when the Doctor left, when the Doctor arrived at the end of the episode. She reminds me of the recently passed away actress who was really great in the Damons, Mrs. Hawthorne. And I mean, she was great, Mrs. Hawthorne, in the Damons. I don't think it's as good as the Damons, but I definitely think it's definitely up there as trying to at least be a little bit like the Damons. And Mrs. Hallway and Mrs. Mrs. Hallway, Haywood and Mrs. Hawthorne are both very similar characters in this idea that she's trying to warn the village, telling them there's an extra gravestone, which turns out to be a weeping angel. I also love the idea of having a weeping angel inside a graveyard at a church. There's something so sinister about that. I just love that idea to have them. I know it's not necessarily an original idea, but I thought it was really well executed, just having a priest walk up to a weeping angel and then to be zapped back in time. And obviously the idea that the normal people would just assume that if you saw a statue in the middle of the road, that would be just sort of from the church and someone's playing a prank on you. I just find that amusing that they would think that, and obviously that's their downfall and get sent back in time. But also there's a real sense of like, this character knows more than she's saying throughout, which is quite nice. I think it was quite creepy and foreboding as for a character to have. Obviously, she's trying to warn everyone because she knows what's going to happen, and it's just quite sinister that everyone just thinks she's mad, and it kind of a bit depressing, really, that no one would be able to take her seriously. Much like Mrs. Hawthorne in the Damons as well. So she's very good at doing that. I think it's a very interesting plot element to have, and I really loved the reveal scene where she talks to herself as a child and tells her, "I am you." It's just sort of very creepy and sort of really gives that, again, just pushing what the Weeping Angels can do that bit further and having that kind of moment, which you haven't really had in another episode, because it's always, you haven't had an older version of yourself meet your younger self, except in like The Girl Who Waited, which isn't even a Weeping Angel story. So yeah, it gave me that kind of vibes of meeting your older self, which is quite a scary thought, really. And I think it kind of did it better than when Rory met Rory in Angels Take Manhattan as well. So yeah, Mrs. Haywood was great. I liked her too. Before we get into the cliffhanger, there is a side story in this episode as well, where obviously we have Belle trying to find Vinda. This is more low-key in the story. It's not really that relevant in terms of, I'm looking forward to them meeting, but I think the more interesting thing is this idea that Azure is going rounding people up into these passenger forms. Now, I'm curious to see what the point of the passenger form is, other than just trapping life forms in it. Is that the sole reason that they're trapping all these people for? Or is it that they need them for something else? And that was the thing in the Division plotline from last week, is they had all these hostages. But why? I mean, apart from maybe having negotiating leverage in that situation, I can't think of any other reason why you would want to have all those people. Maybe it's just being cruel, for all I know. It could well be just that. But it just begs the question, why are they doing this? So I'm wondering if we will get some kind of explanation. And maybe they're using him to power something, like some kind of machine. Maybe they're the reason for the flux. I'm just curious to see what the point of them all is. And the fact that they keep going on about it makes me think it's significant. I do think it's nice how Belle knows about the passenger forms, which makes me further think that she is in some way related to the Doctor, because obviously the Division and the Doctor all know about the passenger forms. So, and also I'm wondering if it's from the time before the passenger forms were sort of gotten rid of and banned. So I'm wondering if that she's from that kind of period, and because of time, the way time's moving, she sort of found herself in post the flux sort of, and the passenger forms being legalised or whatever. So yeah, I'm curious to see where it leads. I'm not entirely sure what sense it makes yet, but I'm sure it will be explained. So let's talk about that monster of a cliffhanger. I mean, this series, I know, what's her name? Jodie said that Chris Chibnall was the king of the cliffhanger. And until this moment, I didn't necessarily believe her, because while I thought the cliffhanger to episode 1 was good, I didn't think the one to episode 2 was good, and I didn't think episode 3 was that good either. It kind of just felt like pulled out of nowhere, to be honest. I mean, it was still good. Like, it was a good scene. It was just pulled out of a hat for no reason. Obviously leading into the next episode, but it kind of felt like tacked on to the end. But this one, it felt like a proper cliffhanger, like a big bombastic, well, not bombastic, but a big cliffhanger with a lot of consequences for the rest of the story, and leaves you begging a lot of questions, like, for instance, is the theory that the Weeping Angels are actually Time Lords true? Because this seems to confirm it. I mean, a lot of people thought that, what's her name? That strange woman from the end of time was also going to become a Weeping Angel. So I wonder if they're going to touch on that. Maybe that would be interesting. But it's just a monster of a cliffhanger. Like, when I saw that final shot of the camera coming right above all these hordes of angels, also that's another thing about the Weeping Angels in this story, their sheer number, it just completely makes you feel isolated and completely like everything is out of your control. Like, this foreboding sense that they are just coming in to get you and that there's no escape. That was the best part of the episode. It's just the fact that there were so many of them in one place. It was terrifying. I mean, it was terrifying as an idea to be stuck in a situation where there were that many Weeping Angels, and that the only option for the Doctor is to surrender to them, and that she's got no choice but to admit defeat, which is quite a scary thought. Like, there isn't a happy ending to this story. Everyone's in the past, and Jodie is now a Weeping Angel, and you're thinking, where the fuck can this go next? And it's just the best feeling in the world, and it's probably why I'm giving this such a positive review. It's because it really, I mean, as a cliffhanger, it's just one of the best. And I just think, I mean, I said that I didn't necessarily believe Jodie when she said that he was king of the cliffhanger, but this and the Spyfall one and the Halloween Apocalypse are some of the best cliffhangers in at least New Who history. There are some pretty funny ones in Classic Who, though. Stop! Don't move! Sorry. Or how many beans make 5? And I just love those cliffhangers as well. But these are the proper cliffhangers that you want. The ones that leave us questioning what the fuck is going to happen next. Because at the end of the day, that's what gets people to tune in. That's what gets people interesting. And that's what you want, building momentum towards the finale as we lead into the penultimate episode next week, which is about to blow my mind because of the next time trailer. So let's wrap up my thoughts and talk about next week. Back! Oh, fuck's sake. So overall, my thoughts on Doctor Who Flux is that this episode, Village of the Angels, is not only is it the best of Doctor Who Flux so far by a mile, it has that element of like standalone story, but also feels incredibly connected to the rest of the narrative, which I don't think War of the Sontarans really did. War of the Sontarans is in a weird place where I think that the story is good. It just doesn't feel like it's a part of Flux. It feels like an outlier. So it doesn't really feel... It feels like a bit of filler, to be honest. But I still like it as an episode. Like, I feel like there's a strong potential for a very good Sontaran story there. I just thought it was a bit... It's a bit out of place, particularly when you have this, which feels like it has that Monster of the Week note with the Weeping Angels, but also feels like it weaves in its parts of Flux very well with the Division and the Weeping Angels and Belle. Although I will say Belle's, like, these little cutaways between Belle and everyone else is a bit strange and a bit takes you out the story a little bit, but I don't mind it so much as long as it has a good conclusion. One thing, a minor gripe obviously, is that there are lots of scenes where there are multiple people staring at Weeping Angels. And then, for instance, the best thing I can think of is in the TARDIS. There's like 3 of them there. And surely one of them would blink, but not all of them would blink at the same time, if you know what I mean? And it's just a bit like, well, how is it moving? Because surely not everyone is blinking at the same time, you know? But yeah, other than that, really standout episode for me. A really great Weeping Angel story. They just get to do so many things that I never imagined they could possibly do. And it was just so haunting and foreboding, and I just thought it was one of the best directed episodes of the show, I think, at least of this era, if not the show overall. And it's down to Jane Magnus Stone, obviously. I googled in between, so I now remember. And of course the writing of Maxine Elderton, who delivered by far the best episode of Series 12, in my opinion, The Haunting of Villa Diodati, which has that same horror vibe. I think she's replicated that really well here as well. So yeah, overall I'd give it a 10 out of 10. It's phenomenal. I loved it. It was amazing. It was the best. But perhaps the yet best is yet to come, because in the next time trial, and this is unprecedented for Chris Chibnall, like, I would not have expected this from this era, to put a major returning character in the trailer. I mean, like, that's amazing. To have Kate Stewart come back, I just love that so much. I literally screamed. It was amazing. But yeah, I just wanted to say a quick note, I'm so excited for that. Also think, hopefully it's not a massive spoiler in the episode, but if it's not, I think it's really nice that they included her in this. It'd be a nice little bit of publicity. Maybe get some Capaldi viewers on board. I know a lot of people loved this unit. I wonder if Osgood would come back. That might be interesting, because obviously she played a big role in the Lonely Assassins game. So I wonder if they could maybe link the two stories together, particularly with the idea of sort of Edge of Reality coming in with that video game. I mean, the Weeping Angel story might not continue into the next one, but it's an interesting link that both of those stories have happened in the last year, so it's a possibility. But yeah, really excited for next week. Can't wait to see Kate Stewart back again. She is great. It's one of my best favourite parts of the Capaldi era, is the unit team having Kate and Osgood. I hope Osgood is there. I don't think she will be, but it's a hope. Osgood is one of my favourite characters of the show, so I really love to see her come back, along with Kate Stewart, who's also phenomenal. I just cannot wait. It's going to be amazing. So yeah, that's my review of Village of the Angels. Thank you for watching. This has been me just rambling like mad because I'm crazy and I loved it so much. So yeah, thanks for watching and bye.